The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
This is Gerard with episode number 30, the Dirty 30 of Florida's Fresh Mix on the Florida Podcast Network, a random mix of Florida's freshest personalities.
Welcome back to Florida's Fresh Mix podcast. My name is Amber, and I am with your host, as always, the host, Gerard Legagneur. Did I say that right?
You know, it's never going to be perfect, girl. I mean, unless you take like years and years of French. But yeah, you know, you do it. It's I.
Funny enough, my last name, I don't know if I've ever actually said it on the podcast, but it's Amortegui.
I've been trying to avoid this moment forever. I've been purposely not trying to have this moment, but go ahead.
I feel your pain. My last name is Amortegui, but it's spelled with like 10 different letters, and it just goes over everyone's heads. It goes over my own head. I feel like I wouldn't pronounce it correctly.
What's so hard with that?
See, yeah, when you say it like that, but then when you see it in writing, it's like, ooh, like everyone gets scared. That's kind of the same with our guest today. Not that this whole conversation is going to be about last names, people. Don't worry, because that's super boring. No, we have something better in store.
With this guest, it's really relevant because, wow, yeah, I would have totally gotten it wrong. I would have butchered it completely.
Our guest today is Liz Olszewski. I feel like I got that wrong, but we're going to do our best. She is the founder of Horses Healing Hearts, which is an awesome nonprofit organization that provides equine assisted therapy to children whose parents struggle with addiction.
Listen, Amber, we've done a lot of, this is episode 30. We've done so many interesting interviews about things that I know nothing about. We did an interview with a paranormal investigator. We did an interview about psychic auras. We did an interview with a kid who's got a photographic memory. I learned a ton from these interviews. And if you had told me that we would have a guest that was going to connect horses with alcoholism and dealing with alcoholic families, I would have said, okay, that's just a little bit, untethered. All right. But you know what? I was completely wrong. I learned so much in this interview. The way that she connects it's very clear. And wow, did I learn a lot, especially from someone that, doesn't know a ton about horses. My sister is very close friends with Glenn the Geek, who has the Horse Radio Network. So he would probably kill me for saying that. But and Glenn's an amazing dude. Yeah, I don't know a ton about horses. And I feel like I really, really learned a lot about horses, about trauma, a lot about addiction, and overcoming adversity, all wrapped into this one interview. It was really amazing.
Absolutely, Gerard. And I'm not a horse expert either, but what I learned about horses from this conversation, it's not your typical, the anatomy of a horse, different breeds and all that. It kind of dives into the psychology behind why horses are so perfect for this kind of therapy. Exactly. And how they're able to, I still don't know how, but emotionally connect with these children, again, in ways that I feel like most of us will never understand. And Liz did such a great job painting that picture for you guys. So yeah, we hope you all enjoy this. And also, if you can't get enough of Liz and her incredible story, you should totally check out Without Wings, which is a documentary film. That documentary does a great job not only telling her story, but bridging the gap between her experiences and why she created Horses Healing Hearts. So we have a link for that in the show notes. Check it out.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned it. With Liz, she's got so much content out there. I really had a field day learning about her and, watching the documentaries and the videos. And so I felt like I was talking to someone I already knew. That is the way that I really love to give an interview. So
yeah, absolutely. She's all about getting the Horses Healing Hearts name out there so that way they can help out more children and more families affected by these really terrible and tragic things. So we thank you, Liz, for all you do
Definitely.
for our South Florida community as fellow South Floridians.
That's right.
So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and take a listen to Gerard's interview with Liz Olszewski, the founder of Horses Healing Hearts.
All right. Today we are here with Liz Olszewski. I hope I'm saying that right, Liz. I'm used to my name being butchered my entire life, so I just want to.
You did great. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I feel that we're buddies already because we tried to have this interview before, and then during that time, I'm actually very thankful that we had this extra time and rescheduled because I have taken a deep dive into your story in ways that I didn't have time to do before. And wow, I just have to say, you're used to telling your origin story. You're very open kimono about it. You're very transparent. It's lovely because people need to understand how we got here. But I'm going to be forced to ask you questions you've had to answer a million times. But I have to say, it's one thing for people to ask you, what have you been through? I think it's more appropriate to be like, what have you not been through?
Right.
I mean, girl, it's
kind of felt like us doing this audio to get it all set up. It's like, this will happen. We are going to make sure this happens. Thank you for that.
Adversity breeds opportunity and progress. And your story is the perfect example of that. So there's so many things I want to ask you. I want to challenge myself to try to ask some questions that maybe you haven't been asked before, or maybe look at things from a different perspective. But the origin story is important. You've been through so many things. The first thing I want to know is, tell us why your childhood was definitely not normal. And I want to know, what age were you or around, or maybe it happened gradually? When did you know it wasn't normal?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, I came from a home with a lot of dysfunction, a lot of violence, a lot of addiction. My mother, my father, my natural father, and my stepfather all struggled with alcoholism. And that has its own set of circumstances. But I would say I knew something was very different, probably around the age of 8, but I couldn't put a name to it. Just got this internal feeling something was different. And I would say not until I was 12, when my stepdad decided to get sober, Ivan, it was kind of like, aha, that's what's happening. So and he was very cool, took me to a lot of AA meetings, and I really got a lot of education that way. So I was fortunate. A lot of people go through their whole lives into adulthood and just have this feeling that something was very wrong when they grew up and never, or it's very late when they find out what it all was due to.
That's right. And, at the end of the day, Ivan, through his journey to find sobriety, there are a million things from your extremely personal. I'm so impressed with the things you shared about your personal life story. But I don't, for the purpose of this interview, I don't think we need to go into all of that stuff.
Right.
So focusing on the positive. I mean, Ivan took control of his own sobriety, apparently. And but were it not for him, maybe you wouldn't have hung out with Aunt Susie and been introduced to Jonathan, and the rest is history. Tell us about that.
So what you're referring to, when I was 6, my mother and father divorced because of alcoholism and some physical abuse, and then moved to Ohio from, we were in Tennessee then, and moved to Ohio, and she remarried again, and to the gentleman we were just referring to, Ivan Trofimov. He was a Russian descent. He was an alcoholic. He was pretty violent and burned our toys and shot our kittens and did some horrible things between the ages of 6 and 12. And then when he got sober, right after that, he sent me to his aunt, so my step aunt in Pennsylvania. And she had she'd rescued this horse, a mustang. And for those of you who don't know a lot about horses, the discipline that she would end up training him to is called dressage. And when you look at a mustang, it's kind of like, gosh, how do I describe this? It's like picking up a dog that's kind of adopted from the shelter and putting him in a dog contest for like a supreme breed, and it's like
Right.
he's built what they call upside down. So his rear end is higher than like his withers. And it's just, his conformation is such that he's like working against himself the whole time, but she didn't care. So she found this horse that was very, very wild and did not intend to get him, but couldn't get him out of his mind. So she adopted him. And it ended up taking, several months before she could even sit on his back. But she went ahead and trained him to this high level in dressage before I met him. And he had these horrible gray scars on the outside of his body from having, escaped through barbed wire fences in his prior life. And
Oh my gosh.
as this deep 12-year-old at the time, which a lot of us children of alcoholics are because we've been through so much, I remember paralleling and saying, your scars are on the outside, mine are on the inside. You've
Right.
been rescued and done incredible things, and I want that opportunity. And, you're not really regal breeding stock. And I know I'm not either, but that's okay. We can still do incredible things. So that was the beginning of really my first time in life ever wanting to move towards something versus away and hiding and fearful. And he trusted me too. And Aunt Susie said that was not common because of his past and abuse. So I felt really honored.
What is your best guess as to why a horse like Jonathan would try so hard to escape his surroundings?
Not being treated well,
Mm-hmm.
which is exactly what happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
Just not feeling safe, feeling fearful. And when Susie she was actually looking for a horse for her daughter. And she said she walked through this barn and they named him Jack and the Beanstalk because he was snorting and foaming. And he literally was taking his hooves and putting them in between the wood planks of the stall and trying to crawl out of the stall. So they
Wow.
named him Jack and the Beanstalk, which, is tongue in cheek, but it's kind of not
Mhm.
funny. It's like this poor horse is trying to escape. And so, of course, she said that's not a fitting name. His name is now Jonathan. But it's what we do. We try and get out when we're in so much pain and you can physically get out or you can emotionally disassociate, which horses can disassociate as well. But thank God we can disassociate because that's kind of a saving coping mechanism that a lot of us, if you've been a sexual abuse survivor or physical abuse survivor, even witnessing physical abuse, they say that witnessing it is more emotional damaging a lot of times than even being the receiver of physical abuse because of the sense of helplessness.
Right. And so, I know we're kind of giving the Cliff Notes version of your incredible story. I mean, you pardon me if I'm just, highlighting a couple of things that blew my mind, but, living in abandoned houses with, no water, no heat, et cetera, and having to move around and being made fun of at school because of those things and not being able to bathe and you having to steal food from the cafeteria and all these things. And this is on top of dealing with your alcoholic mother. And you do acknowledge that she taught you values, et cetera. But that must be very confusing. Right?
Yeah, that's an understatement. There are a few times when I look at our relationship where it literally, and that's the problem with children of addiction is one moment you're getting something so violent. In the next moment, you're getting a glimpse of a genius, smart, caring, loving person. And it's that never knowing what you're going to get is what really messes you up. I can remember thinking like, if she would just consistently be horrible, I could handle that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in college one year and I remember, this is probably 2 or 3 years before she passed, but I was heartbroken over some guy and we were on the phone and I was just bawling my eyes out. And she said, honey, you need to go get your mind off yourself, find something to volunteer for, and you will walk in, with the intention of giving, and you will walk out getting 10 times more than you gave.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, that was kind of, foreshadowing for what I ended up doing. But I remember thinking, how can someone be so emotionally healthy and smart? And then, a lot of times when they start drinking very young, their emotional age is actually really young. It gets stunted. You hit it on the head. That's what really messes. One of the things that really messes us up is the constant back and forth.
My impression is that, obviously you suffered many, many years as a child of various forms of abuse. and various tough times. I mean, what you just said is very powerful. You thought it would have been easier just to have her consistently be horrible. Whereas Jonathan, as far as I can tell, maybe was the first consistent friend, the first consistent experience, someone you could depend on consistently. And then you loved horses, and so that when did you have that epiphany of connecting horses with your mission?
Yeah, I do summers and Aunt Susie's and back to reality in between. So it was kind of this 90 days of total utopia and then back to reality. But ironically, my ex and I had done, very well in business, made a lot of money, lost a lot of money. And I was doing an exercise that, I don't know if you've heard of Tony Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
In college, I'd listened to these personal power tapes. And one of the exercises he suggests is I think it's called a rocking chair test. And it's a little morbid, but you basically envision your funeral. And for the purpose
that's not macabre at all. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But so I was kind of envisioning my funeral, and there was a lot of lovely people there, and they were saying nice things. But so much of what they were saying was how I was such a good counterbalance to my husband, or I was a good complement to helping him with business. And it just hit me that I'm put on this earth to do way more than that. Mm-hmm. And I had this hole in my heart because money didn't fill it, so I just felt and I literally thought, where was I happiest in my life? And I can remember standing in the barn, which I had a horse at the time. It dawned on me that it was that summer in the barn with Jonathan. That was my first, moving towards and great feeling. And I thought, I want to go back there. And I actually had a very expensive horse, but I thought what would really be great is to leave a legacy, to pay forward what was done for me through horses and mentors, pay that forward for other people who were standing where I stood. And I would want at my funeral for them to say, she fought like hell for children of alcoholics. That was a much, much better vision for me than what I was currently seeing. So that's where the idea kind of started. And I didn't know exactly how. I think you may have heard this in one of the videos. I was writing a book about myself, about the trauma, and got a little freaked out about releasing that because I didn't want, it not to be accepted and whatever that would mean for me. So I used another Tony Robbins principle, which is ask the right questions, which is how can I help these kids, which is what the book was intended to do, and involve horses because that's my passion. And that's when I just kind of sat on it for a few months until that time I was volunteering. And I got out of the car and saw that little puzzle piece bumper sticker, and it hit me like a lightning bolt. Why not? Why not do, equine therapy for children of addiction?
That's great, because I think the disconnect people probably have when they hear this, your story is, okay, there's alcoholism on one side, and so you want to pay it forward and help children that have been through similar experiences. And then you've got your love for horses. How do you connect those two things? And the way that you've done it, I think, is rooted in the nature of what horses are and who they are as animals. I mean, one thing stood out to me in Without Wings. You said that a horse's field of energy is 80 feet, and telling the children that horses will only connect with you if they know you're authentic. Tell us about what is unique about horses. What makes them so special?
Right. So what's ironic is when I got this idea to do it, all I knew is that it worked for me. I didn't know the scientific reason for why or what's behind it. So in a nutshell, the horses are so good for our kids for two reasons. One, they share a lot in common. Horses being prey animals, which if you remember 7th and 8th grade science, predator, prey. Horses are very hypervigilant. Our kids are very hypervigilant. They're very scared of surviving day to day. But where the magic comes in is the fact that because of that prey, being prey animals, they are hyper attuned to survival. And, I think the story I tell is if cougar, which would be their natural predator, one of them is laying at 79 feet and faking sleeping versus really sleeping, that's what they do before they pounce. The horse knows that difference. And so how does that affect, or how does that apply to us humans? Well, if we walk inside of that 80 feet and we're feeling in our gut a certain way, sad or upset, and then on the outside, we've got the smile and we're going, I'm fine, everything's wonderful. They know the disconnect, and they instantly say, not on my time. not in this bubble because I don't know your intention. It's not matching. It's not authentic. And are you going to eat me? And so they won't connect. I mean, they're not going to attack you because they're a prey animal, but they will just get away from you. And if kids have this motivation to connect, then even though it's painful, because many of the kids have stuffed their feelings for many years and disassociated because that's how they had to survive. But we tell them, you know, if you want to connect, you have to feel these feelings, even though it's a little scary.
How did the kids end up being at your program? I'm sure there are different ways. Sometimes it's probably initiated by the parents. I'm sure that you have, you know, a lot of people, as you've gotten the word out and the popularity of HHA has gotten out.
That's the most common question is how do the kids find us? How do we find them? So word of mouth, rooms of AA, Big Brothers, Big Sisters actually kind of uses us in a sense that, well, not uses, collaborates, partners with us because they have a prerequisite that when children are matched with a big, if they have addiction in their, you know, one of their parents are addicted, they have to have a year sober before they'll give the child a match. So they'll call us and say, hey, can they do this for the year in the meantime for support? And when I first heard that, I got really kind of like, hey, wait a minute, it's not the kids' fault. But from a nonprofit point of view, there are so many people that need our services. What I figured out they're doing is they're controlling their outcome and putting their resources towards the kids who have the higher likelihood of putting that to good use because their parent is on their way to sobriety. So it made sense. But, you know, shockingly, we don't have as many kids now and I know the need is out there from the pandemic. We're getting the calls, but we have a few different programs, but we actually have, you know, a few spots in the children's prevention program that hasn't been the case for years. So we're now going into schools and doing essentially part of what we do at the barn, which is the peer-to-peer groups and support. That part of it we call Rise Up. We are taking Rise Up to the schools and now doing it. We're in South Tech Middle School, working with kids. And our plan is to keep, because transportation becomes such an issue at times, and especially for these families. Right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, that's a good segue, because I was going to ask you how COVID has affected HHH with respect to, have you seen any noticeable increases in alcohol abuse rates because people are stuck in the house or they're frustrated because their you know, money's getting, you know, got really, really tight, or they lost their job, et cetera, et cetera. And how has it affected how you run your business? I mean, granted, you know, riding horses takes place outdoors, which is a safer space, but how did COVID really affect those type of considerations?
Yeah, so two things that hit me. One, when it first hit us and it was like, you know, a bomb dropped. It's like, okay, the world is different. You know, it's no more the same. We had to pivot pretty quickly and figure out how are we still going to see these kids because they definitely need us. So we went to all virtual for whatever that first long length of time was. And there was a silver lining in that we had kids that had moved on. We had several states, but one had actually moved to Israel and one girl from North Carolina. And so these people could now join us. And that was amazing. We're like, we never thought about offering it to people who had moved on, but we never thought about Zoom, you know? So that, and so every other week we meet in person, and on the off weeks we do Zoom, and we're able to include people who've been with us in the past. We're seeing in the kids that, and it lines up with the statistics that we're hearing, is that there are multiple traumas and they're complex traumas. One of our kids who actually was already in the program, the grandma called, and his grandma was raising him because it's him and his little sister. Their father died 2 years ago of a disease from his spinal cord got infected from IV drug use, and their mom is on the streets and lives behind a Home Depot in a tent. So grandma is raising them, and this little boy, when the pandemic hit, he would not come out of his room. And grandma called us and said, you know, I'm really getting scared. He doesn't want to go outside. And so the children's facilitator and myself, and this kid is kind of funny. Before, one of our group rules is you can pass. And so this boy always passed. He didn't really want to comment. Well, then he started commenting, and what he would say is chicken nugget. We're like, okay, it would be, what are your 3 words to summarize today? And he'd go chicken nugget. And we're like, okay, that's actually 2 words. We'll say the chicken nuggets. How's that? So he loved chicken nuggets. So she went to McDonald's and brought chicken nuggets. And we get to the house and she sits out in the hall while he's got his door open and they're talking. And then I'm sitting out in the family room with grandma. And in about 40 minutes, he comes out and he's so brilliant. He's got his Rubik's Cube and he's just solving that like a maniac. And we just started talking to him and said, hey, do you want to walk outside? And he's like, yeah, not today, but it was baby steps. But he would not even come out of his room. And he wouldn't, as you probably see these kids get over zoomed, they're done with the screen. So yeah, a lot of different effects, but the biggest thing that we're seeing is that with adults and with kids is the connection has changed. How do we connect? And horses are masters at teaching connection because they know how to read body language and they're always authentic and they're always in their body. So they're good too at teaching us how to get in our body and get out of our head, which is where a lot of us can stay and spiral.
Do you see kids expressing frustrations unique to the COVID epidemic? Saying that, I feel like my parents, their alcoholism's gotten worse. It's more stressful. Have you seen any kind of noticeable increase, or is it kind of the same?
Yeah, we have seen it increase, and we've seen, again, with our kids, I actually did a video that was kind of interesting because when it first hit, and you see us, adults, people, society, going to grocery stores and there's no toilet paper and walking up and down the aisles in mask or no mask. And is the person approaching me going to infect me? I mean, these really core life issues that are scaring you. And it dawned on me, our kids on a nationwide level and probably internationally live with these life and death things daily. When they get off the bus, they don't know what they're going to walk into. They don't know if mom and dad are going to be fighting, passed out, not at the house. They are over-parentified. They're helping their little sibling do homework, or if a fight breaks out, they take them in a closet and do a game and try and get them distracted. So as much as our whole society was in a state of panic and like the bottom fell out, a lot of our kids were certainly affected by that. But as a whole, it hit me the symbolism of the rest of the world is kind of feeling what our kids feel every day, which was a little freaky, but it kind of slapped me in the face and I had to share it on a video. But yeah, we are seeing a lot more trauma and situations getting worse quicker, and kids not really having, when a lot of the kids went back to school, some of our kids were very resistant and hesitant to go back to school, but then they went back to school and loved it. It's almost like fear of taking a risk. And I remember I was watching a show that was talking about the bullying and the pressure that because of social media. And it was saying that, not related to the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, as a culture, what we see with our adolescents is they're risk averse, and the incidence of, suicide and self-harm has just skyrocketed. And I think the pandemic has brought a lot of that too.
Right, unfortunately. So for the parents out there or anyone else that might be listening to this and thinking, wow, this sounds like, first of all, I didn't even know anything like this existed. And secondly, you're based out of Boynton Beach and your farm is in Delray Beach, correct? But you live in West Palm? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, all right. Florida in the house. Now you know where she is and where they are. All right. So for parents out there that are listening to this and like, I didn't even know this type of thing existed. How can you get us to envision what that experience is like for the child on a day-to-day basis? Meaning, is it all about the horses as kind of an escape? And I know that you have a mentorship program. Or are there any specific, therapy discussions or therapy groups about their home life? Or is it all of that? Or
it's all of that. The quickest way I describe it to people, and this is going to age me a little bit, but think of like Pony Club meets Breakfast Club. And the good part of Breakfast Club, not when they were smoking weed, but they were just realizing they all had a lot of.
Look, I'm Gen X too, girl. So you're not. Yeah. I bet I'm older than you. Don't worry about it.
And adding to Breakfast Club a group called Alateen, which some people might not be familiar with that, but it's AA. Alateen would be the subgroup for the teens or the really adolescents or young adults to go to support and get support for living with the addiction. So those three things mesh together on a Saturday for 2 hours. So they get there and we meet in a clubhouse and we have group rules that we go over, which are basically just respect each other. You can pass. What's said here stays here unless you're harming yourself or someone's harming you. Or
I like put-ups only. I saw that behind you on the wall. I love that. And I'm sure that I wanted to ask you about, how this addressing kind of bullying concerns, et cetera, but we can get to that later. But go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And the kids love to call it pull-ups only because it's just, they like to be silly.
Oh, yeah. I like that. See, from the mouths of babes. Yeah.
Not a lot of people that put-ups are basically the opposite of put-downs. But so we go over the rules and then we give a child, we ask them their highs and lows. And we can hear anything from I got an A on a test to my dad's on life support because he overdosed. And depending upon what comes out during that little bit dictates where we go. If it's something really heavy like that, we will forego the curriculum we had planned in order to have the group support that child if they're willing to discuss it more. But if it's light stuff, then we have a curriculum that is put out by SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration, and NACOA, National Association for Children of Alcoholics. And it's got different topics like coping, feelings, decision-making, safe people, addiction, and treatment and recovery. And we rotate those subjects every week, and there's always an activity linked to that. So say one was feelings, and 1 week they would paint these rocks with all different kinds of feelings. And then a few weeks later, they'll walk in and there'll be a book bag in the middle of the room. And the younger group, they weigh like 60 pounds and the book bag's 30. And I'll say, who wants to lift that up? And, they'll all struggle and moan. And some people are like, it's so light. But then we open it up and we start pulling out the rocks. They're like, oh, we remember doing these. And the feelings of happy, sad, proud, frustrated. And the object behind this is to let them know, because a lot of kids, children of alcoholics, three things they think. It's my fault, which is not true. I'm alone, which is not true. And there's no hope. So when we pull out these rocks and they see the feelings, we say many of your parents carried this full book bag of rocks and feelings before you were even born. So it had nothing to do with you. And then they get to feel the difference of when we dump 80% of the rocks out, now put the book bag on. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's much lighter. And that's a very experiential way to say when we get through our feelings and let them out, then our load is lighter. So that would be an example. And then as we're doing that, they bring back horses, and we can have up to 3 horses at a time. So 3 kids would go out and they get a 15-minute private riding. And then they come back and we, get the next group out. So while they're either waiting to ride or after they ride, they're working with volunteers in terms of doing arts and crafts or board games. And many of these kids have never had an adult sit down with them and play a game. It's really sad, but they see these things. And then we have a closing time where we do 3 words that described your day. And we may get something like, I remember one time a girl said, hot, bumpy, stupid horse wouldn't go. And of course, stupid horse wouldn't go is one big hyphenated word. And the girl said, I was cantering and they let me hold on to the bucking strap, which is like a strap on the saddle. And she said, what's your bucking strap in life? And she said, my faith, because it keeps me centered and it's there for me to hold on to. And I just feel better knowing that it's always there with me and it can save me. And so that these kids have this ability to parallel and metaphorically think about these things on an unbelievable level.
Tell me about how the mentorship program works. I'm particularly in tune to this because I did Big Brothers Big Sisters for at least a decade, and it's such a life-changing thing. So I'm a huge proponent of mentorship. So tell me how that works. I'm trying to plug HHH as much as possible.
Yeah, so I love that. Yeah. So once a month we have an opportunity where our mentorship director comes and takes our what we call littles, which would be kids from the program. And it used to be middle school and high school only, but now it's pretty much anyone who any of our kids, elementary age, and then has a group of either like low-level college or even some higher level college that most of them are interested in psychology. And it's group mentoring. It's not one-on-one mentoring, but you might have a group of 6 college students and 8 or 10 youth, but they get together and they do the most fun stuff. I mean, you think of your basic, ice skating, putt-putt, all that. But these kids have gone to recording studios and recorded songs. They've gone to escape rooms. They've gone to Murakami Park, Butterfly Garden, and the things that I think is really going to rock their world and they're going to think is so fantastic. They're always they're always happy to do something, but it amazes me what they'll get out of Murakami, who, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a nature, beautiful plant,
Yes.
and they're very deep and into it. So they get these experiences to be around these older mentors, people who are living a healthy, productive, and, but it's closer to their age because a lot of our volunteers are, older. So they really cling to these people. And we've trained all our mentors and all our volunteers to do what we call reflective listening, which is a big art. It's something I'm not real great at because I love to talk, but it's important. So trying to maximize that relationship and that time together. They spend about 2 hours once a month together.
That's fantastic. And to parents, they have to kind of do some soul searching. If they're the ones bringing their children into it, they have to admit that they have a problem. And what about if it's not the parent that's bringing the child, but someone else who cares about the child, whether it's a teacher or a family member? What's that tension like?
Right. So there's 2 things here. One, 1/4 of our kids are with what we call kinship, either aunts or uncles or grandparents, because the parents are either incarcerated or overdosed or suicide. So those situations tend to be a little bit easier because they're not living in the chaos as directly, but the other situation you bring up, one thing in the very beginning when I wanted to start this, my best friend said to me, first of all, are you insane? It is the absolute worst time to start a charity financially. And then she said, secondly, putting the word addiction in your mission statement is like putting a label over these parents' heads when they come in and out, and you're going to fight that. And at first I said, absolutely, you're right. And having said that, I know that there's people we've probably not gotten to or not reached because of that issue. But for me, it was so important to leave that in because the fact that when we open up about what it is, that's when we can truly start healing. And we do have, not frequently, but not irregularly either, we'll have one parent who's either in treatment or in early recovery, and the other parent, most of them are divorced, and the other parent wants to bring the kids, and the parent who is using or early recovery will still have that shame and embarrassment and know what it's about and say, I don't want the kids to go there. We had a doctor and a professor couple that had been divorced, and the doctor was like, it's not happening. And we find that the higher the income of the family and the higher the education of the family, the higher the shame. And literally it had to go, the family court had to get involved, and they had the therapist come out and check out our program, talk to the kids, and both husband and wife agreed that the therapist could make the decision about whether the kids would come or not. And it ended up that she said, yes, they really are benefiting from it. But the judge said, yes, when mom has the kids, they'll come. When dad has the kids, they don't have to come. Because if somebody's really against something, they're going to find all kinds of reasons to either come late or they didn't have their clothes or, whatever. So, but they still got benefit every other week. But yeah, it's a common thing you bring up. And we've opened up because of the pandemic. We've gotten a lot of calls about, no, parents aren't addicted parents, but my child is just really struggling with anxiety or bullying or, body image issues and gender identity issues. So we now have started something called youth emotional healing that is actually equine therapy. So it's different from what I've talked about previously, which is prevention. This is equine therapy, and it takes place in an arena. The horses are on the ground. There's no riding, but it's very helpful to just be around them and touch them and be with them. And so 7 years ago, we started equine therapy as a business, a revenue to support the nonprofit. And we specialize in working with treatment centers. And I don't know if you know, but Delray is the capital for recovery and treatment centers. So we've seen almost 6,800 clients in the last 7 years through that program.
Wow.
Yeah. And then so now that we've started this equine therapy for, it's really 7 to 17, but we're finding 12 to 17 is the age that's interested. And they come and we talk about all of those things. It's very helpful.
Wow. There's so many interpersonal challenges, and it looks like you and your folks, your staff, your supporters have figured out unique ways to address those things, because you've got your eye on the prize, and that's, the kids. And so I give you a ton of credit for that. Very difficult interpersonal issues. Speaking of interpersonal issues, I have no idea how you're going to answer this. Okay.
You got me nervous already.
No.
You got me nervous already.
Nothing to be nervous about.
Okay.
You talked very poignantly about forgiveness and forgiving your parents. And I will admit that I've had a fairly idyllic, I had a very idyllic upbringing. And I've had very few people in my life I felt let me down, betrayed me, lied to me. And so I haven't had to forgive many people. But I have to admit, I think that one of my fatal flaws is that I find it very difficult to do when on the rare occasions when someone lets me down. You talk about forgiveness in a very poignant way with respect to your parents and others. How can horses teach a child forgiveness?
I don't know if this is directly going to answer it, but it's one thing we had happen in one of the adult treatment center groups is horses they'll interact and they'll play, and it borders on, as you watch this interaction, you don't know if it reminds you of a brother and sister who are like nagging each other, and then it's like tickling, and then it turns into like punches, and then it's like,
I've been there with the producer of this show.
Right. Where is this fine line? So you'll watch this with horses happening, and the group is like, what are they doing? And we're like, what does it look like? So one thing that did come up one time is one of the horses bit the other in the neck really hard, and then like got in and got out. It was really nasty. And they just went over and started kind of eating the grass by each other by the fence, almost as if it hadn't happened. And I said to the clients, I said, horses, the way their brains are formed, certainly they'll remember if somebody abuses them, but in a herd relationship like that, their brain is formed in such a way that they really can't hold on to resentments, because if they did, that would take up a portion of their brain that is not available for them to be able to flee quickly. And their prey, they got to be always. So, if you can imagine two horses at a watering hole being like, that bee was blah, 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 and I can't even believe that happened. It's not, they get involved in that too long, and before you know it, one of them's dead, so they've got to drop stuff really quickly and get over it. And one of the clients kind of raised her hand, and she said, what just dawned on me is what you said is the horses can't hold resentments, because if they do, they could die. Whereas humans, we hold on to resentments over a lifetime, and it kills us slowly. So, and it, as you bring that up, and, thank you for your honesty and your authenticity about the forgiveness thing. It's very common for that to be a protection mode. And I spent many years not forgiving my parents, very angry, very, I was horrible to my mom when I just used every opportunity I could to remind her of how she was failing as a mother, because I felt like if I did that enough, I could make her decide to get sober, and none of it ever worked. She died, never.
Maybe shame her into it.
Yeah, I tried. And she always said, this is going to come back to you in aces. And it has. My daughter's given me my fair share, but it's a process, and people do it when they're ready. And I did realize, I learned from Wayne Dyer that we don't do it for them, we do it for us. Because think about it, that person is running around doing their thing. They have most likely forgotten what they even did, and may not agree that they even betrayed you or did. They may have a completely different view of what happened.
Very good point.
Here we are carrying around this heaviness and this angst. And the minute we let it go, it's like, wow, not that it's not scary, it is, but you just instantly feel lighter.
Wow. So I don't know why you were nervous about answering that, because that was off the charts, mind blowing and insightful. So I'm very pleased I asked the question. So
Good.
that was great. Wow. You used the word conduit before, and I think that's exactly right. My takeaway is that, I mean, obviously, it's horses healing hearts. And so it is about the horses, but I don't see the horses as the center of your mission. And you can correct me if I'm wrong in any kind of way, but I see it's about three things. I see it's about healing from past trauma. I see it's about coping through current trauma and empowerment to deal with future trauma. And the horses, to use your word, the horses are the conduit. And it's about helping these children muddle through and process, and in giving the children a sense of community, even if it's just one friend, and even if that friend is just a horse, not even a human being, Yeah.
Well, that was said very eloquently, and I'm gonna write that down at some point, because that was probably, I'm gonna steal that and put it on our website, because it says it very succinctly, and it is what it's. And we have kids who come, not many, but we have kids who come who don't ride. They may ride 3 times and then say,
"Oh, really?"
Or yeah, I mean, I love horses, so we tend to think everyone's like us, and it just makes me crazy that they sit there and they don't ride. I'm like, are you nuts? Do you understand how good of an opportunity? But that's them. So they're still benefiting, and it's whatever they get out of it. So, but yeah, you're right. It is more about the kids. And, our hardest thing that we've struggled with is the awareness of what we do and the shame of the stigma of the disease. And that, I think it's, I anticipated 12 years ago, it would take like 4 years to really educate the public on what we do and get the word out. And I vastly underestimated, I'll still be doing an elevator pitch with somebody. And, first thing if I say our mission is, we use horses to help children who are growing up with parental addiction to learn how to, live a better, healthier life. And the minute I say horses, they don't even hear that. They go, oh, autism? I'm like, ugh. So I said, no, not autism. We work with children who have parents who are struggling with addiction. They go, oh, so the kids are the addicts?
Wow.
No, I said, so I correct them like a third time. And I literally at a cocktail party one time, and this shows you how vast the opinion of the guy looked at me and he said, so what you're telling me is you have this group and charity and you collect money to help kids do pony rides for drunk people.
Wow.
And I started opening up my mouth to correct him, and I just stopped and I just walked away. It's like, sometimes you just know, no matter how long I talk, we're not getting through this. But that is the stigma that's out there, is the lack of ability to really see this as a disease, which I understand is challenging. I've struggled with it my whole life, because each and every person can choose to pick up or stop picking up. But it's a very complex, emotional, physical, physiological, psychological disease on so many levels. I think we're going to battle that. I was talking to my mentor, Sis Winger, who's got to be in her 80s. She's the president of NACOA, and she's in Washington, D.C., and really gets things done. She stands about 4'10". And when I was complaining about this one day, she said, Liz, that's how you know you're working on the right problem. And I said, what? Because we're not going to get through the stigma in our lifetime. And she said, no, we probably won't. But she goes, that's how you know you're working on the right problem. And I said, sis, that's one of the most depressing things you've ever said. And she's like, no, think about it. There's this saying, and I know I heard it in Alexander Hamilton, and I'm going to butcher the saying, but I think it's a Chinese proverb that honored is the one who plants the seeds for a tree under which they won't be able to enjoy the shade.
Wow. Well, I take, that story you told me about what the guy said to you.
Yeah.
I draw from that 2 things. One is that, look, you're a trailblazer. I mean, you're creating something that didn't exist before. And the second thing stems from that, which is that people are just going to be ignorant about it, and the connection between the horses and helping the children and the alcoholism and all that stuff. So, that's a testament to how you just need to get the word out. People can be so close-minded and stubborn and narrow in their thinking because they've got their, pun intended, their blinders on.
Very good, Gerard.
They can't,
I like that.
they can't see outside their periphery, right? So keep making those videos, the Without Wings and all your other movies. It's so inspiring. I watched every minute of it, of everything you sent me. And so, we'll put those links in the show notes. And speaking of getting the word out, I know that you testified before Congress, and I was struck by the 10-year-old you talked about who compared alcoholism to being a kidnapper, and he described the ransom, and it was very powerful stuff. How did you end up speaking before Congress? Just tell me anything about that.
Yeah, so the woman I just referenced, Sis Wenger, so she's NACOA, National Association for Children of Alcoholics. They've been around for 40 years, and we're very privileged to have many of their co-founders on our advisory board, and she's one of them. So she called me in 2016 and said, look, this as I said, very involved in DC. She said, this other organization is sponsoring this thing called CARA Day, Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act Day. And it was, the precipice was that it was when the number of overdoses was over the number of people who died from fatal car crashes. And they decided to have this day where people who had lost someone to overdose would come and testify. And it was a bipartisan opiate task force. And they really wanted the boy that came with me, Dylan, they really wanted him to speak. I wasn't really invited to speak. I stretched that a little bit, but and we prepped him, bless his heart. He's a really good spokesperson, but they had, I think, 24 people to testify that day, and all of their stories, we were given like 4 minutes, and each person's story went over. And he was the only one that was there. 23 of the other people speaking had all lost a child, and it was almost all opiates. So I think he was in the second group of 7, but we're sitting next to each other, and they go through about 4 people of the first group of 7. And I whispered to Sis, I said, I can see Dylan is thinking in his head right now, I don't belong here. My mom didn't abuse opiates. It was alcohol. And I'm the child of, not the parent of someone. And she said, whisper to him, addiction is addiction. And the fact that you're the child of is all the more important. You're the only one under 18 here. So I said that to him, and he still looked a little nervous. And so when he went up to sit, he was like number 2. She said, push your chair up there and sit next to him. And everyone who testified was holding a picture of their loved one they lost. So I kind of held his picture like I'm supposed to be here, but he's got a nameplate in front of him. I don't. And when they came to him, he only used like 1.5 minutes of his 3 minutes. I think he got a little nervous, and I thought, this is such an opportunity. I thought, I'm going to let that microphone go down the rest of the 7 people. And if nobody else gives a story from the place of a child, I'm going to grab that microphone when it comes back, even if security takes me out. I'm not losing my other 2 minutes to share. So I did. And you'll notice when I'm speaking so fast, that's why I'm talking so fast. And the lady's like, and you are the congresswoman.
Okay. Got it.
So that's how that whole thing came to be. And shortly thereafter, a lot of federal money came down. I mean, not, from several efforts that started dealing with the family of the person addicted in addition to the person addicted. So the whole family is affected and has basically a different type of the disease or a different effect of the disease, but it's a family disease. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen about that. So yeah, Sis Wenger got me that opportunity. And she said the next day we rode home on the train, and she said, so tomorrow you're going to be in front of a few legislators, and you're going to have exactly about 1:30. And she said, do not tell a story. You need to put it in their language. How can they help you, and get it very brief? And I said, so what do I say? So we sat on the train, and we specifically wrote out exactly. And she was right, buddy. When you get in front of these people and their aides, you get half their eye contact, and you don't really know if they're listening. And the more you put it in their language, you see them taking notes more. So it's really getting ready for your audience. And I want to be Sis Wenger when I grow up. She has just done so much for them.
Well, I'm glad you grabbed the mic. It seemed very organic to me, and it was very passionate, and the sincerity shone through. So you go, girl. I mean,
Thank you.
I loved it.
Will you bail me out if I ever get arrested?
Yeah, no problem. Well, probably I'll have to get one of my criminal law friends.
Defense lawyers, right?
Yeah, but let's not put that out into the universe. Right,
right, exactly.
I have to ask before we wrap up. I mean, you just talked about it affects the whole family, which is so true. In your mind, do you believe that there's a genetic component, and how much does that concern you as a child of alcoholics?
So I know there is. Science proves there is. It's genetically. We have a predisposition for that. I do drink. I drink socially. And I find that when people say, if they know anything about my past and they question me about drinking, I get really defensive. I'm like, okay, so because my mom abused it, I don't get a chance, but there's a lot of legitimacy to it. And I
remember, it's not your fault.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember telling my roommate, who I barely knew at University of Dayton, look, if I start going out more than 3 or 4 nights a week, here's my aunt's number, because she was my guardian at the time. Call her. Do not tell me you're calling her, because denial is the first step and I'll try and stop you. But just, you have my permission. Call, so I put like these fail safes in place. So it is real. It's a real thing, but it's also, that doesn't mean that people don't overcome it. I think you saw in the movie, my oldest brother, he froze to death in Ohio, and he was an alcoholic, and that was a horrendous way to die. It affects families, and there's no, like, the best descriptive way I can tell to people, because when you're in a family and you're so angry for this person for doing these things, and you see this loved one just disintegrating before your eyes, for somebody to come to you and say, oh, you have a problem too. You're like, what? I'm not, but what happens is, somebody described one time, imagine like those mobiles, like a baby mobile that's over like a crib with the different characters on it. And every character carries a certain amount of weight. And when you take one of those characters off because they're absent because of addiction, the other characters on there counterbalance. They make up to keep it like this semblance of even, and then let's say they come back from treatment and they want to take that spot back. It throws everything out of whack. And the kids I've seen kids a lot of times say, I didn't see my parent a lot when they were using, but now that they're in recovery, they're at AA meetings as much as they were out drinking. So, and they have expectations of, the parent comes back and they have to regain the house rules, and the child's like, oh, you're sober for a month now, and you think that we should respect you as a father. Like, you have to earn that, and that could be a triggering factor for the father to go, well, I'm never going to get my respect back. I might as well keep drinking,
So complicated.
Yeah, there's like small little things that people are trying to work out in that transition of bringing the person back from recovery.
Right. Well, look, I mean, this is real talk. These are real issues, and I want people to draw from this, anything that they can, any commonality that they might have. But what I want them to pull from it more than anything is inspiration, hope. Get connected to horses, and I want to end on a. I'm going to leave you with something positive that's impossible for you to know. Okay.
Hey, I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
First of all, horses and podcasting have brought a very special person into my life. His name is Glenn the Geek, and he is the founder of the Horse Radio Network, and he's a very close friend of my sister, who's the producer of this show. And he's just a wonderful human being. And were it not for horses, I would not have this wonderful person in my life. So that's point one. Point number two is that the first time I don't have a ton of horse experience, but the first time I rode a horse was probably, in my mind, the most perfect way I could have ever imagined. I was, I'd have to guess 7 years old. I was a child actor at the time. I was doing a ton of television commercials, and I rode a horse for a Levi's jeans commercial. And that was the first time I ever saw a horse, petted a horse,
Really?
And oh yeah. And I was, I have pictures from the shoot of me on the horse and around the horse. And I just appreciated their gentleness, their majesty, and just the size blew me away. It's not until you're on top of that thing for the first time you realize how big they are. But so gentle and so majestic. And God, I was so young, but I remember that day like it was yesterday. So I just, just a little nugget for you and the fans.
I'd love to a big impression. That's awesome.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So I can, you've inspired me to get out there more and get more connected to these gentle giants. And I'm just so happy that you've decided to share your story on my show. I feel very honored. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you.
So now I want to shamelessly plug Horses Healing Hearts. Okay, get out your checkbooks. Tell us.
Gerard. Speak it.
First of all, do you have any events or anything else coming up that you need to promote while you're here with me on the mic?
So we have the first Monday of every month from 8:30 in the morning to 9:30. We have something called Carrots and Coffee, and it's basically a barn open house. We had one earlier, and it's just awesome. They come, they get to see the property, which is a really impressive property that you would never guess is plopped in the middle of a city, and find out. And until you step on the property and get next to these horses, it's kind of like you say, it's hard to envision, but you feel it. So that's one constant thing that we have going. And we just got on a new software where we can actually sign individuals up to be what we call mission ambassadors. So if somebody says, well, I want to help, but I can't come out and I just want to spread the word. And ironically, we could link a little thing to their system where they can take donations, whether it's $5 or $50 or whatever. So we're always looking for mission ambassadors. Those are probably the two easiest ways. Our large fundraiser we've had to forego this year for COVID, but we're trying to come up with something that we can do. But yeah, to go to hhhusa.org. You can reach me, or you can go through the contact section there to get a hold of me. So I thank you for that shameless plug.
Okay, well, there's more to come. So where else? Where on social media are you? Give us everything.
So Facebook, Horses Healing Hearts. I know we're on Instagram, but be sure that when you're on there, you're with the Horses Healing Hearts in Boynton Beach or Palm Beach County, Florida. So that's really important to, if you're Google searching it or whatever. And hhhusa.org is our URL.
Hopefully people can reach out and let's do more good in the world. And so thanks again.
You should come see us. You're in Miami?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's convenient for me because my parents actually live in Delray and my sister's in Boynton. So don't be surprised if
you don't have an excuse. You need to just give me 40 minutes notice and I'll meet you there and we'll
40 minutes. Okay. Yeah. All right. That's it. All right. No problem.
The day would be better, but for you, Gerard, I would make it happen on the fly.
Well, I really appreciate you so much, Liz. So folks, listen. What an inspiring interview. Liz Olszewski. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted. She's paying it forward, doing the Lord's work and with horses. And so does it get any better than that? I don't think so. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Gerard. You're the best.
Wow. This interview was heavy. I know, but I hope that at the end of the day, the thing that you draw as my audience is that it was inspiring. But listen, here's the harsh reality. And this is the first time I've had the opportunity to make this particular observation in my fresh take. First of all, it's a reality that everybody goes through tough times. Everybody does. The difference is how people react to them and how much support people feel that they're getting from the outside world and from other people. The harsh reality of this crazy world of ours is that sometimes people just suck. They just suck. And you can't depend on anyone at the moment. You can't depend on anyone but yourself, or you feel that you're alone. But when people feel that they don't have other people, that so often, sadly, is their cue to give up. And by give up, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, take drastic measures, attempt to end their life. I would suggest an alternate path based on this interview. Find an animal to love you unconditionally. People sometimes suck. If you can't depend on a person, depend on a non-person. Sometimes the best therapy that can exist is to give back. There are people that find purpose and happiness by, donating their time to a charity and things like this. But that involves people, and that's great. That's great. If that is your path towards finding meaning in life to prevent you from doing something drastic and irreversible and to take the beautiful you away from this world, that's fine. But it could be an animal. Now, being responsible for the life of another can be a great motivator. You got this animal, rescue a dog, rescue a cat, rescue a gerbil. Take responsibility and take ownership of the life of another living being. And you might start to think about yourself as having a different sense of purpose. It'll make you think twice about doing something drastic. It will let you feel the unconditional love that sometimes only an animal can give. Also, that unconditional love, it can also not be so conditional. You will get back from animals what you give. And if you can find confidence that an animal can love you, then knowing that the world or one person or 3 people or 10 people or 20 people or the entire world can love you as well, it's not that drastic of a leap. Okay? So before doing anything crazy, try saving an animal. Now, I personally am a cat person. If you're a dog person, if you're a cat person, you could be a hamster person. You could love snakes, iguanas. There are so many choices. All right. And a lot of animals you could just get for free. All right. So just think about it. Just think about it. What can an animal bring to your life to bring you joy? And I'm not saying that you necessarily have to be on the brink of personal destruction in order to have an animal bring joy to your life. You don't. All right. Just think about, is there a hole in my heart that needs to be filled? How easily could I fill it by just going to a shelter and getting someone who's going to love me from day one, or something, someone, however you want to call it. All right. Maybe you have doubts about yourself. Are you a good person? Do you have the capacity for love? Do you appreciate things that others do for you? Do you have worth? And when that animal treats you with love, perhaps you'll have epiphanies about yourself that, yes, you do have worth. Yes, you are capable of love. Yes, you're capable of giving love and receiving love. And you deserve to be on this planet. And you know what? People are lucky to have you. All right? So I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Fresh Mix. Thank you so much. This was a poignant one, a little different. and the way it was different, I loved every second of it. And I hope that you got as much from it as I did. All right? Take care. For details and show notes about today's show and our guests, go to freshmixpodcast.com. I'd really love your feedback, both on today's guest and on my fresh take. The Florida Podcast Network has a closed Facebook group exclusively for super fans of their shows like Florida's Fresh Mix. So we all look forward to hanging out in there with you. Just search for FPN Insiders on Facebook to leave us comments, get early scoops, contests, and other special treats. Or you can just complain about how Florida is so muggy, okay? Now, if you're not a Floridian and you've never been to Florida, muggy is when it's like an extra layer of like plastic, sticky, whatever. It's like fly paper. It's just on you. It's just, the weather is just gross and it just makes you sweat. And I don't know. But you know what? As nasty as it gets, just from walking outside with the sun beating down on you, I don't complain, because it's better than being cold. That's all I got to say about that, because I can always just walk back into my air-conditioned crib. All right, so there you go. Anyway, be sure to visit all the great shows on the Florida Podcast Network. You can find them at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Keep catching Who's Fresh in the Florida Mix with Florida's Fresh Mix podcast.